right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel, The Intersection of the Supreme Court's Decision on Abortion Rights. If you don't know me, my name is Morgan Overton. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm very excited to serve as your moderator today. Just a little bit about me. I wear a lot of hats, as I'm sure most of us do in this room. But I am proudly a board member of Planned Parenthood, Western Pennsylvania. Yes. I recently became elected as vice chairwoman of the Allegheny County Democratic Committee. And finally, for my actual 9 to 5, I'm proud to serve in the office of Mayor Ed Gainey. But I think the most important hat that I wear, and the first hat that I ever have worn, is that I'm a Black woman in America. And these issues do not only interact with me professionally, they are incredibly personal. And I recognize what this moment could mean if we, not only just for my community, which is not a monolith, but for dozens of intersectional communities, if we are to unravel decades and decades of civil and human rights fights across intersectional communities everywhere. And today we recognize that it is important to have intersectionality as our guiding principle. And I'm so excited to hear from our esteemed panelists today who deserve their flowers first and foremost. They are powerhouses here in Pittsburgh and in Allegheny County to ensure that across race, gender, economic status, and policy, nobody is left behind. And we uplift all of us who are ready to answer the call of actualizing reproductive justice. So with that being said, of course, the topic of today, it will be heavy, right? And in some cases, it might evoke an emotional response. So this is the social worker in me now telling you all, if you happen to have an emotional response to this, please take care of yourself and your well-being. And without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists for today. Dr. Amy Collins is an adolescent and young adult medicine specialist and the medical director at Allegheny Reproductive Health Center, where she has been an abortion provider for the last 4 years. Kelly Davis, MPA, is the executive director of New Voices for Reproductive Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to transforming society for the holistic health and well-being of Black women, girls, and gender-expansive people in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Dr. Kathy Elliott has over 25 years of experience in nursing, social service, community, and individual mental health treatment. Her culmination of education, work, and life experiences, echo on that, life experiences, have assisted her in continuing the legacy of providing a comprehensive approach to addressing the issues that impact the well-being of girls, women, and families. Sydney Etheridge, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania. Prior to this, Sydney worked for the Planned Parenthood Federation of America for nearly 10 years, serving as director of the Healthcare Investment Program, where she provided guidance on ways to further embed women's health in system transformation efforts, focusing specifically on value-based payment, telehealth, and health equity. And last but not least, Susan Fritchie is a senior staff attorney and the founder and director of the Western Pennsylvania office of the Women's Law Project. Her law practice focuses on providing legal services for the 17 freestanding abortion facilities in Pennsylvania, including direct representation in state and federal courts, amicus representation, compliance work, legislative advocacy, representation before state licensure boards, and if you didn't think that was enough, strategic defense from any anti-abortion violence and disruption. So let's just give it up for these powerful ladies. So we only have so much time together because an hour is just like that. So panelists, do your best of, keeping it about, 2 to 3 minutes. So let's get started. The first question is about Dobbs versus Jackson. Sue, this question is for you. Our region has been an access point for abortion care even before the overturning of Roe. Even still, with the stakes so high, Pennsylvania is constantly battling anti-abortion legislation. Could you explain the legal landscape and what providers who offer abortion services need to navigate to ensure their patients get this essential health care?
Thanks so much, and thank you all for being here. I will just really briefly set the stage for our hour together by talking a little bit about the web of restrictions and regulations that hamstring our heroic providers. In Pennsylvania, abortion is legal up until the 24th week of pregnancy. We are not a haven, not by any stretch of the imagination. Abortion is heavily, heavily regulated and subject to legal restrictions that are unrelated to health or safety. I'm just going to list a few of them. You're probably familiar with many of them. We have a waiting period, as if human pregnant people are not able to figure out for themselves without government assistance what they want to do about their pregnancy. We have a 24-hour waiting period preceded by a state-scripted lecture designed to discourage abortion. We have parental consent for people who are pregnant who are under the age of 18. And for those young people who are not able to get a parent's consent, we make them go to court and meet with a judge and convince the judge that they are mature enough to make this decision on their own. As a 60-some-odd-year-old adult, I cannot even imagine going to, as a lawyer, I can't imagine having that conversation with a judge, let alone could I have done that when I was 17 or 16? We have very stringent facilities regulations requiring many providers to meet the standards of ambulatory surgical facilities. And to build one of those kind of facilities nowadays may be $2 or $3 million. We have a doctor-only requirement, so advanced practice clinicians who are more than capable of providing abortion care and can certainly hand a pill to a person are not permitted to provide abortion in Pennsylvania, doctors only. And perhaps most upsetting and most damaging, we have a ban on Medicaid coverage of abortion, which specifically and intentionally targets people with the least resources to deprive them of their freedom. We have pre-procedure testing that is completely pointless. Some of that we are in the process of getting waived, but even the waiver process requires you to go find a lawyer and wait on the Department of Health. So taken together, all of these restrictions delay abortion care, make it more expensive, less available. The fact that we are the hub for abortion care right here for many Midwestern states, and that this fragile network of 17 clinics, that is what we're relying on to provide this vital service for an entire region. So let me stop there. I'll be happy to take questions about extraterritorial enforcement of other states' abortion bans and the threat of a state constitutional amendment to wipe away our rights entirely in this state.
Thank you, Sue, for providing that, big picture lens. And now, Amy, this question is for you, specifically about post-Roe abortion access. A month and a half post-Roe, what are you seeing on the ground in the clinic?
Bad earring choice with the mask.
I know.
We are seeing patients upon patients upon patients upon patients. I think the thing that I can provide to you all is sort of a firsthand experience of what is happening in the clinic, because I see patients every day who are seeking abortion care. The day after Roe fell, we got 500 phone calls for people seeking care. particularly from Ohio, because everyone got a phone call saying your appointment that's coming up is now canceled. So as you can imagine, as a clinic that was receiving far less phone calls the day prior, we've had to meet that with rapid onboarding and hiring of staff, training, getting more people in the door. Patients are, we are seeing almost double the number of patients we were seeing prior. And honestly, the reason that we're not seeing more than that is just that our capacity in terms of space is just limited. As Sue said, ambulatory surgical centers require, we really need bigger space, but it would probably take us about a year to even consider moving into a new space. So we've been very creative about using the space that we have. More than 65% of our patients in the last 2 months are from out of state. So while I would previously see people from Steubenville, Ohio, or other nearby cities in Ohio, I have people coming to me from Cleveland, from Columbus, from Cincinnati, from Texas, from South Carolina. You know, we have people coming from all over the country to access care. And the stories that we hear are just heart-wrenching in terms of, you know, accessing abortion at baseline in a state that you live is hard enough. But when you need an abortion and you live 4 hours away and you have 3 children and you can't take off of work because you just started a new job and you can't really afford the gas, but you can't really afford, and you can't really afford the babysitter, so what do you do? And we just, that's what we do all day long. And it's just become even more prominent with the number of patients we're seeing and with the desperation that we're seeing for folks who are just trying to seek care. And on top of that, the thing that keeps me up at night is all the people that I never talk to, right? The patients who I never see, who never make it to me, who are trying to access care, thinking about accessing care, and I just never even hear their stories. So that's the one that keeps me up at night.
And, you know, you're coming from it from a humanizing level, but, you know, the stigmatization of abortion care has turned into outright criminalization. So what kind of conversations are providers having with patients and each other about this? And I'll also bring Sydney into this question as well.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to echo what Dr. Collins had said just about the volume and what we're seeing and how the situation has really evolved on the ground, and what does it mean when you see something like the reversal of Roe, and how does that impact clinics? I mean, coming from someone who has stepped into this role and every day has to make decisions for the organization, our staff, and the people that we serve, I think every single day we are confronted with legal questions, big and small, about how are we going to stay open and how are we balancing serving our patients every single day, the patients we have, the patients we may have in the future, and how are we protecting our staff, all the way from our doctors who are providing the service, all the way down to the clinic escorts who are standing outside and helping our patients come in. So it is every single day thinking about this, talking to people like Sue and her team, and talking to our partners in this abortion care ecosystem to try to stand as united of a front as we can to really continue to serve, but also realizing that we are in uncharted territories, especially with the legal landscape, and how we navigate that is, it's just gonna look different, and how are we meeting that moment?
Just to give you a sort of real world example of this, because I think it helps to clarify what this actually looks like in practice. For example, when you do a medication abortion, you take a medication in the clinic with the physician. It has to be handed to you by a physician in the state of Pennsylvania, which is absurd medically, but that's what we're required to do. You then go home and you take more medication to complete the process. If you don't live in Pennsylvania, is it legal to take those pills in your home state where abortion is illegal? Right? These are the questions that we face. Are we supposed to tell patients, oh, you must stay here in Pennsylvania? Can they go home? Are we going to be criminalized if they go home and finish their abortion there, even though they started in Pennsylvania? Right? This is like the nitty gritty that we are facing every day.
And it's, I think what the hardest part is, it's, you know, so many of our providers are like, you know, thinking about that risk and willing to take that, but it's heartbreaking when you have patients come in and be like, well, what if I'm bleeding a lot? Should I go to the emergency room? Should I just stay at home? And those are the hardest questions to get and for our staff to have to deal with, but it is on top of everyone's mind, on top of all the other decisions that have to be made in a day.
And both of you already alluded to, the domino effects that people aren't even realizing are part of this whole process. And so we're going to talk more about the broader ramifications and intersections. And so, Kelly, I'm going to ask you to speak on, the words rights and choice are on the lips and banners and posts of abortion rights advocates everywhere, but there is an additional level and word to this conversation that is equally and if not more important, which is access. So can you explain what having access or not having access means for rights and choice?
So, rights and choice is almost like faith without works, it's dead. If you don't have access. And when you talk about access, it brings it into a conversation that's not theoretical and about what's available to you, but also a justice conversation about what, as a human being on the planet, you deserve. And so I think that that's what reproductive justice as a movement, as a framework offers. And today, over the course of Netroots, we hear a lot about shorthands. People say Roe, or people say Dobbs, but it's not by coincidence that the Dobbs decision was in Mississippi, the nation's blackest state, right? And I know that from experience because it's where I grew up and where 100% of my nuclear family resides. So abortion is a racial equity issue. It's not by coincidence that here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that the constitutional amendment that seeks to limit Pennsylvanians' right to abortion also limits their ability to vote. These things are inextricably linked. And so while I hear folks talk solely about rights, we know that rights on the books actually do not ensure equity. As a Black American, as a Black woman, I know that day in and day out. It's my family's legacy. It's the legacy of this country. And yet, oftentimes, we think about laws as being the only framework to achieve liberation. They are certainly a component. Obviously, we should have 17 abortion providers in Allegheny County, not 17 abortion providers across the state. We should have rights and accountability metrics that allow folks to have their legal rights protected. But access is not just about rights and having a doctor available. And we can see that through the Black maternal health crisis, right? That it's not about having doctors available. The majority of people have births in a hospital, and yet they still die at alarming rates, especially Black women after giving birth. So access doesn't equal affordability. Access doesn't equal being equitable. And so those are the things that reproductive justice provides in addition to the rights and health conversations.
Thank you for that. And Sue, this question is for you. And you've already alluded to this earlier, but how has access specifically to abortion been chipped away?
The anti-abortion movement for decades pursued a very intentional and deliberate strategy of targeting what they considered to be the weaker links. And it was a very incremental strategy. So they targeted patients with parental consent and Medicaid restrictions and waiting periods. And they targeted doctors with doctor-only requirements and a very nasty violence and disruption campaign. They targeted clinics with ambulatory surgical facility regulations and way over-regulation of simple medical care. They targeted specific procedures. They targeted specific reasons that were not deemed appropriate reasons for having an abortion. So all of this led up to the loss of the federal right altogether. So these what looked like little incremental chipping away actions led to a cataclysmic loss of a fundamental right. They are not stopping there. They are not stopping there. The Dobbs decision makes very plain that the wish is to remove access to contraception and many other rights that are secured under a substantive due process theory or a privacy theory. So think of the right to travel, the right to marry, anything related to LGBT rights. All of these are on the line. And I think also criminalization of pregnancy outcomes that have nothing to do with abortion. Simply criminalizing people for not getting to the doctor fast enough when they went into labor, for using a substance that somebody somewhere thinks is not compatible with ideal maternal behavior. We have seen these prosecutions already. They have one characteristic among them. They're almost all aimed at women of color.
And Sydney, can you build off of this, off of what Sue mentioned about the chipping away? Now, how does this impact sexual and reproductive justice on a system level?
Yeah, so it is no surprise, considering the history of obstetrics and gynecology, that our healthcare system has really facilitated this chipping away because they have siloed sexual and reproductive health care and women's health, as sometimes the system will call it, from the broader medical system. And we see that play out every day. For those of us in here who go to an OBGYN, you go every year, but that's considered a specialty provider. So there's one way of looking at it. Obviously, when we look at things like the maternal mortality rate, and when we look at how a lot of initiatives look at it as maternal and child health, we can't separate the person carrying the child from the actual child. So how are we giving and meeting their needs when we know that they can be complex pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy? But so many initiatives to meet this moment are just focusing on the two together. We see that in system transformation efforts, how our country pays for healthcare. It's incredibly hard to separate bundles that we see in OBGYN care to encompass more providers. So when a provider like a Planned Parenthood or an Allegheny Repro does an IUD, the health system and the OBGYN at that larger system can get the incentive payment for it because we can't separate that code from a bundled payment. And so there's just a lot of these things that our healthcare system has allowed to happen that has facilitated this otherness and has left sexual and reproductive health care, particularly abortion care, out on an island. And when you're out on an island, it is easy to be attacked. It is easy to become engulfed with just all of the things that Sue mentioned. And we are so busy fighting those fights, we can't have conversations about what does a meaningful Medicaid program look like for people of color, for women, or for people who could reproduce, because we are just trying to stay open and meet the requirements that the state has put on us. And it's not leaving us behind as providers, it's leaving our patients behind, and that's what's most concerning.
And now, Kathy, I really want to just uplift your work at Gwen's Girls and with the Black Girls Equity Alliance. You work to address and combat the already stacked system facing marginalized groups in Pittsburgh. So with this decision and its implications, what kind of environment is this creating in the city?
I would love to sit here and say that there's been this big change, but it's really the same of the same of the same. It's historical, right? And so, I just want to just give some voice and context to lived experience as well, because we can, focus on the numbers of women that are coming into our city, and as Dr. Collins said, going to bed at night thinking about those that she did not talk to. What keeps me up is thinking about almost 50 years ago, probably more than that, sorry, about 70 years ago, my grandmother sought to have an abortion, had an abortion in McKeesport. And from a variety of different complications, she passed away. And she left a 5-year-old daughter who was my mother and my uncle who was 3. And so I grew up with my mother really being an advocate, and not just by her voice, but by her actions of uplifting those that were in the proverbial shoes of her mother that still and unfortunately experience the same types of decisions, difficult decisions, whatever the situation is. And all the disparities that Black women face in not only our region and in our country. So again, it's the same of the same. What I'm so angry about is that, as Sue talked about, like, there have been folks that have strategized for years. Where have we been? Like, I'm taking accountability for myself. You know, at some point you got to say, okay, yeah, we didn't, but now we have to. So everybody, all hands on deck, we got to fight. Because it's just, when I think about the girls that we see and that we provide supports to at Gwen's Girls. Gwen's Girls is a nonprofit that was started by my mother that serves girls from 8 through 18 and predominantly Black girls, because in our region, in the areas that they live in, they're living in poverty, crime, high crime rates, you know, education, poor, like all the different determinants that we know lead to a woman or a girl or a family being impacted and not being able to be self-sufficient. And so one of the things that we have been able to focus on that, you know, isn't directly you know, about abortion, but it's about comprehensive sex education as a whole. Until our society, our systems, our school systems, our families start to have, first of all, be educated properly and get the information about health in general, but then reproductive health to our young people, it's going to be, again, the same of the same.
Just want to meditate on that. Okay, so now we're going to shift to consequences. And Kelly, this question is for you. Roe was never enough, and we knew this because of the work of those in the reproductive justice movement. And now that Roe has been overturned, how can we use this moment to reestablish reproductive rights in a more intersectional way?
As you said, Roe has always been the floor, and we say that every day in reproductive justice, and that reproductive justice is actually more than abortion. Before Roe v. Wade, the vast majority of maternal death and disability was caused by unsafe abortion and not having access to abortion. We are already in a maternal mortality crisis where Black birthing people are 3 to 4 times the national average of maternal death and disability than their white counterparts. And it's gotten worse during several pandemics, including COVID. We still have not dealt with the pandemic of racism. We still have not dealt with the pandemic of gender oppression. And the flash point of George Floyd's murder, what we got was statements. And some corporations got a Black person to helm diversity, equity, inclusion with little resources to actually make institutional change. That's why I say this fight is actually about more than abortion. Reproductive justice actually is a framework to talk not about abortion, because abortion gives you the window into what it's like to be marginalized by gender, racism, class, and gender expression. So it shows all the ways that fissures in our society have pushed people to the brink, which cost them their lives. And so if we're already in a Black maternal health crisis, which is spiraled out of control because of COVID-19, and then we took away health care additional health care in the form of abortion restrictions, what do we expect to happen? Right? More people are going to lose their lives. And not only that, they're going to lose their livelihoods. We've seen what happens with criminalization, which uniquely impacts Black and brown communities. And when we're speaking to others across the gender spectrum and New Voices for Reproductive Justice, we really focus on Black women, femmes, and girls, but that includes everybody. That includes everybody. When I'm talking to Black cis men who tell me they actually don't care about the right to abortion, I say, well, in states which are, states with large proportions of Black residents where abortion has now become illegal, I say, follow it through with me. What happens when your girlfriend or wife has to name you on the birth certificate, or your ex-girlfriend, because the state makes her to get some kind of pennies of what it costs to raise a child, and you're not able to pay because of racism and you not having a livable wage? What do you think the state's going to do to you? It's going to lock you up. That's already happening. And so these are all end runs to get at folks' economic power. Bodily autonomy is about power, power and control. And what happens if we can keep control in wealthy, cis, white men, if Black people, if Native folks, if trans folks do not have the ability for equal pay for equal work, quality health care, right, to determine their own lives, they are too tired to actively demand a society that will function for their benefit. That's the whole purpose. Why things have been chipped away. Sue talked about this being a decades-long game. It has been a decades-long game of stripping 1,000 paper cuts, right, at providers, and even narrative shifts, right, around what abortion is. I say again, it's not a coincidence that the anti-abortion movement gained steam during the same decades where integration was legally mandated and women were allowed to enter the workforce. It's not a coincidence. So that's what the reproductive justice framework gives us, the ability to contextualize and work across issues, because no matter what you care about, it actually impacts abortion. If you care about the economics, that actually impacts abortion, right? If you care about criminalization, that actually impacts abortion, right? If you care about the environment, actually that impacts abortion, because pregnancy is a time-limited condition. And when you're fleeing a hurricane, what do you need access to? And emergency preparedness in cities, there's never even mention of pregnant people or abortion services. We have drills in all kinds of clinical settings, but not there. So all of these things are part of a grand design, right, aiming at keeping a poor class poor and too tired to fight. But we all know that even though Black women and Black queer folks are tired, we are actually never too tired to fight.
That's right. That's right. Period.
So when people continue to count us out with poverty, with violence, they actually don't know that that is, sadly, the super strength of the whole marginalized community. And Sue talked about it not just being, it's multiple folks that are being targeted at once. And for the first time, I'm seeing folks organize across issues. I saw white gay men get mad about abortion because they realized that they were coming for Arborville, right? It was coming for the ability to have same-gender loving relationships and same-sex marriages, right? I saw white women for the first time, a white woman calls me every day very upset about abortion access because this is the first time that they have perceived that a human right of theirs has been taken away, right? And so we know this is the time actually to not forget just about your own rights, but think about the folks that are more marginalized than you. It should not have taken this to get folks interested in a racial equity conversation or intersectional conversation, but the secret sauce of reproductive justice, Black feminism, and revolutionary Black organizing is that we will make a way out of no way, and we are here I mean, these panels have been happening for a long time, and there used to be all white cis women. Right? Think about Netroots abortion panels in the past. Like, there would be no Sydney, right? There would be no Kathy. What do you mean, a nonprofit leader with half of her head shaved? Absolutely not. Okay, we're in a different moment in time, but let's not stop at the D at DEI. People just say, oh, diversity. We're gonna have a brown face. We're gonna have a queer person, right? No, we're talking about radically redistributing resources and power, which is long overdue.
Yes. I hope y'all are taking notes. And now for our last question to Kathy. For those most impacted by this decision, what needs to happen to ensure they can thrive?
Kelly just told you. What more do I need to say? But it is so true that it's not just about abortion. It is the whole context around choice and, you know, and in all these different sectors, that being taken away. You know, it's so interesting on how, you know, the fight has been to make abortion illegal, but at the other end of it, like families that can't even afford to feed their family, where's the funding and the support around that? You know, our society, our government is just so great in making these, you know, wise decisions, but really don't look at the ramifications on down the line. So, as Kelly said, you know, we're used to fighting. We have to fight. We've been fighters for many, many, many years. And so, unfortunately, it is been part of our responsibility to provide our girls with the, first of all, understanding, because a lot of things that happen in our society, in our schools, in our community, sometimes they think it's them. And we have to educate them that, nah, baby girl, this is historical. These are things that have been even set up by design. And so how do we navigate and create spaces of our own to actually survive and thrive? And so a part of that, as I have said, has been education. Because a lot of times when you're not educated about, number one, your rights currently, on how to, you know, fight, ways that you can fight. You do have a voice. Our systems, you know, will help us or make us think that we don't. But truly, when we all come together, all those marginalized people come together and fight together, we can't be stopped. And so that is what the answer is. And I have seen people rise to the call, but more is needed. Don't want to get into everything that's happening here in our city, you know, and all the folks that have showed up outside of this space, you know, to kind of disrupt and to, you know, further the other agenda. But, you know, at the end of the day, when we are all together fighting for not just abortion rights, but economic justice, all those different things that make us marginalized, we will win.
That's right.
We will win.
We will win. Woo. And I love that you ended on that note, Kathy, because the last question provides a little bit more hope. Because again, you know, this is some heavy stuff. And for each of us, especially as Black women here, this isn't academic. This isn't just what pays the bills. This is personal. This is deeply personal. Because unfortunately, we have no choice but to fight for self-preservation, right? And to be living through American history, and especially here in Pittsburgh, you encounter broken records, right? But yet you have to answer a call. And one piece of my heritage, which is also Native American, one of my guiding lights is to live by the 7th generation principle, which is that you have to be mindful of the actions you take today because it can impact 7 generations from now, right? So it's incumbent on each of us in this room to be mindful of what spaces we have, what privileges we have, what power we have, and think about how that's going to impact 7 generations from now so that they are not living through yet another broken record. We're not having yet another panel thinking about what could we have done, what could we have done. In fact, we want our 7 generations from now to look back on us, their ancestors, and be like, they did that for me. And so I think it's really special and important that this conference is happening in Pittsburgh because, even though there have been reports and reports about this being the least livable city for Black women, there's a lot of hope right here in this room. There's a lot of solutions right here in this room across all of you and those with lived experience. So I want to focus on what Pittsburgh can be. And so that's the question for each of our panelists. What can Pittsburgh be? And whoever wants to kick it off, feel free to do so.
I'll start. So I took this job at Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania in January. I had gone to college in Pittsburgh, spent about 12 years in DC, and could not believe I was coming back to the city. My husband was raised here. He was a Black kid living in the North Hills, and he was like, I don't want to go back. That city's racist, and I didn't like it. And it was a tough decision, but around the time I was interviewing was when Mayor Ed Gainey was coming into office. There were organizations like Gwen's Girls, New Voices, Allegheny Repro, and their head is a person of color. And it was just like, this is the moment. If I want to be a part of this movement, I've been doing this work at the national office for 10 years, and if I want to do this work on the ground and impact people, it's happening in cities like Pittsburgh. And like, we have to come here to affect change and be a part of this movement. And so what I see, what Pittsburgh is and what it can be is opportunity. And I think there's so much opportunity in this city. And you heard it from the people on this panel who are doing this work in this city on the ground every single day. And so many of you who are here in this region. And I really think there is that collective momentum, these groups coming together, all of these different parties, all of these different organizations where these issues intersect are coming together and seeing the bigger issues and realizing we all have a piece to solve it. And what is our piece and what does it have to look like? And I know I'm learning that every day at Planned Parenthood as I work with all of you, what it needs to look like and how we can step up in the right way or step back. And that excites me. Even though this is the darkest time for our movement, in some way it is also like, this is where we're gonna create the next wave, and this is gonna be the next movement, and that is exciting, and that's what we have to hold on to. And I think that's gonna start in places like Pittsburgh.
So, agree, 100%. I think that Pittsburgh is unique in that we have the advantage of having not only amazing nonprofit organizations and organizations that fight for the rights for women and other marginalized people, like the Women's Law Project. We have so many universities and so many, hospitals. Those folks need to step up and step in and help to continue to create this space that is more equitable and more just, when we talk about safe, it's not just physical safety. It's not just, we all know about the violence that's happening in our community. Safety, it comes in so many different forms. And so I think that we have the right people, we have the right leadership, we have, all the organizations and the different entities that often are siloed. And so these are opportunities for us to come together and really be strategic. Folks have been very strategic throughout the years, as Sue has told us. So it's time for us to strategize together to make sure as a city that we will continue to fight and to uplift the rights for all. It is an exciting opportunity when you have your mayor, set a standard and come out and say that he is for abortion rights and just the rights for all. And so if you in this room, those that are watching via stream or even it being recorded, get involved. We all need to be involved because without each and every one of us, we will go back to those days that are, was so familiar to my grandmother in that back alley, having to make a choice that impacted her family at that time and generations to come, me and my children.
So just briefly, Pittsburgh could be a haven and could be a hub for all kinds of reproductive health care regionally, not just for Pennsylvania, but an awful lot of the policy that's going to control whether that comes true is not municipal, it's state-based. And our state legislature is the reason we don't have a Pregnant Workers Fairness Act.
That's right.
Our state legislature is the reason why abortion restrictions keep landing on Governor Wolf's desk for him to veto. Our state legislature is the reason that we are halfway towards a state constitutional amendment, Senate Bill 106, that would strip out of our state constitution any possible right to abortion the same way Dobbs stripped it out of the federal constitution. So if we want Pittsburgh to be a haven, we have to focus on Harrisburg.
Ooh, that's a word. When I think about what Pittsburgh and Allegheny County could be, most of the nation, when you say Pittsburgh, they think one word, Steelers. But Steelers and steel isn't just about a football team and an industry that collapsed 50 years ago. Steel is about the characteristic of the people. We are a steely group. What gives me power, what gives me pride about doing this work in Pittsburgh is not only all of the things that we talked about, but it's the power of revolutionary Black organizing. At New Voices, we help especially Black women and queer folks understand that their bodies are on the ballot, that their lives, their pocketbooks are on the ballot, and what that means, and that it's not just about a presidential election that everybody turns out to, or that everybody thinks about the governor. But these midterm elections are really what decides the context of your life. And even in that, your liberation cannot be legislated. And so ensuring that we have what we need not only to survive, but also thrive is what community organizing is all about. I'm lucky to be here with some of our community organizers. Raise your hands, community organizers. And if you are interested in continuing to organize with us in Allegheny County, not just around abortion, but all the things that impact folks' ability to live a healthy and well sexual and reproductive life, then we will be happy to partner with you.
So what can Pittsburgh be? I'm going to take this a little bit from a personal angle, for some context. So I grew up in Louisiana, where you cannot get an abortion. You cannot get safe medical care as a Black woman who is seeking to give birth, or as a Black person seeking to give birth. So that's sort of where I came from. I see Pittsburgh as a place where we can create what people feel like is home, even when it wasn't. I never saw myself leaving Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana people are like, Louisiana, like there's nothing better in the world than Louisiana. You're from Mississippi.
I know.
We hate you. I mean, right? They're like, wait, you gonna go somewhere where like it snows and there's no crawfish? Like, what's wrong with you? Like people are like, you're moving to where? When I came here for my training, I came here as a pediatric resident. So I actually am a pediatrician, I'm not an OBGYN, who became in this city, right, an abortion provider because there was a space here for me to learn and to learn this skill, and such a welcoming community where, as a white queer woman from South Louisiana who didn't know how to walk in the snow or drive in the snow or survive in the snow, right? I was able to come here and do that, right? And Pittsburgh, a place that I never thought would feel like home, is definitely a place that feels like home to me now. And I think that's what's beautiful about the space, and what we can create is this place where it feels safe, right? It feels like people can grow here. It feels like we can move toward spaces where we have reproductive justice for everyone, and just beyond that, everything we talked about today. So as someone who came from the outside, I certainly see Pittsburgh as a place that can be a safe space where people, if we can build it, and we will build it, people can feel like this is home. I'm safe here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of time for question and answer. So I ask all of y'all to use your best protest voice because we don't have any mics. You can stand.
Hi, I'm Alana. I have a question. I'm from Virginia, and now I'm near North Carolina border, specifically from Cali, a Southern girl. How do you address long-held communities, specifically in the Black community? Because we know it can range from anything from abortion is us killing our own people to religion, especially in the South, being a big deal. So how do you address those things? And then, in part, how do you pull cis-het Black men into the conversation? Because they often don't want to be a part of it, in my opinion.
So I would love to talk to you more about answering those questions, but a few strategies I found is really actually discussing the history of the anti-choice movement. I've had to sit with my own family and say, if you're agreeing with a person that even you think is a vehement racist, then maybe something is afoot here. You don't believe anything that this person says, but then this one thing, you suddenly think that they're in your interest. Maybe we have to sit and think about that. Really talking, and not actually making excuses, right? One of the things that makes me excited about where Planned Parenthood is going is their president and founder, their president and CEO, Alexis McGill Johnson, for the first time saying Margaret Sanger was a racist. And we don't apologize for that. And I say multiple things can be true, right? Population control has a racist eugenic history, and Black women need to have access to abortion. I also point to some of the facts that over 2/3 of people who get abortions say that they're religious, right? And so there has to be something that says that you can have a faith tradition and need access to abortion. Also, it helps to talk about reproductive justice not being about abortion, but also Black maternal health, also infertility, also STI prevention, also HIV/AIDS. These are all the things that we need to transform society about. So I'm not just about abortion, but the way of controlling people's health and well-being, it shows up in several disease areas, several areas of health, right? And showing the through thread to that. And then last but not least, criminalization. I think that folks do not understand that once you make something a crime, that means you go to prison. And so whenever you have a new category of folks who can go to prison, guess who's gonna be locked up? Black men, right? And Black people. And so saying, okay, maybe you don't believe it, but do you think it should be a law against it that can lock you up? Right? And that has always been the thing that gets people's mind to open. I don't necessarily believe in it, right? But actually, a politician shouldn't be in my personal business, because when the government gets in Black folks' business, nothing good comes of it.
Okay.
Okay? And so having those conversations by being transparent about what has transpired, right? What's at stake for what folks care about, and whether it's their money, whether that's their health, whether or not that's a criminalization in the community, and then speaking to what folks value is the way to actually open hearts and minds and get folks maybe open to thinking differently, open to organizing, and open to voting sometimes for the first time.
Woo. Yes. Okay, we got time for one more question. Yes, in the back. use your best protest voice.
And my question is, because of the lack of access to abortion, do you think that this will also create a maternal mental health crisis?
I think you're probably the best one to speak to this. But yes, I mean, yes.
So we've always been in a maternal mental health crisis, right? The narrative around maternal health has been, it's really about doctors and disrespectful care at birth. And that is certainly a factor, but so is the context of the stressors that contribute to infant death and maternal death and poor mental health. What folks don't understand is that the causes of death that impact the disparity that's the greatest is often substance misuse and homicide, right? Which all have mental health components, constant violence exposure, folks that are in intimate partner violence or living in homeless, like state-sponsored violence, right? Police brutality, all those things impact Black maternal and mental health. We do know not only will it affect mental health of the pregnant person, but you talked about the 7-generation principle. This is a 3rd-generation principle, and Kathy is still carrying the trauma of what happened to her grandparents, right? This is what we're dealing with. My mother, who was a nurse, dealt with the trauma of being in the Deep South and having a dead baby inside of her at 6.5 months, right? Like, that and I live with that, right? Something that happened 35 years ago when I was a child, I live with. And so some of these things are long-standing. We are already in a maternal mental health crisis that won't be solved just with clinical interventions. This won't be solved just with clinical interventions. That's why we've had to focus on totally restructuring society, because sometimes I'm like, girl, is it depression, or are you making $10 an hour? Like, how can you not be, and is Wellbutrin gonna fix it, or should you be making $25 an hour, right? Do you need Celexa, or do you need paid maternity leave? And so these are the structural things that actually impact not only physical health, like maternal morbidity and mortality, hemorrhage, preeclampsia, but also mental health.
Yeah, and I think similar to what we've seen with sexual and reproductive health care, mental health is incredibly siloed within our healthcare system. So when you're taking these two facets of the system that are siloed, and then you're trying to create solutions for them, what we end up with are incredibly clinical. And so where we land are things like maternal mortality review committees, which we know in a lot of states just end up placing the blame on the patient who is dead and cannot then speak up for themselves or what was actually happening with their doctors or what those conversations were. And then when you layer on mental health to those, like in those cases, it makes it incredibly difficult for our system to really understand how mental health before, during, and after a pregnancy impacts these outcomes. And I think that's what's really concerning, is that we're not really getting at the issues here at the core of these. We're creating these clinical interventions. We're putting things in boxes that maybe work for different disease types or in different spaces for two areas that we just don't really understand as a healthcare system. And it's at times can just be exacerbating or creating additional stigma around both pregnancy and mental health, and especially when they come together. Another thing is we don't really think a lot about women and people who give birth, their mental health prior to pregnancy or prior to that episode. And when someone's spending majority of their life not being pregnant and we're not considering what their health needs are, whether that's mental or physical, we end up in this environment where their needs are just not being met across the spectrum of time. And that's also, that's the tip of the iceberg of this maternal mortality crisis. Like, what we're seeing is just the top. This is actually a woman and people with uteruses health crisis that our system is just not, it's just, I think it's perplexed. It doesn't quite know what to do. So it's trying things, but we're not really getting at, I think, the core here. And it's going to take a while before we do.
That's right. Well, fortunately, we're out of time. Time flies when you're trying to strategize and disrupt the status quo. But I truly want us to give it up for our panelists. Thank you so much. And onward we go, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
When Natasha was leaving, she was like,